had my first alcohol beverage. I remember like it was yesterday. It was gin and juice, and it was amazing. Yeah, so gin and juice, and I remember being in a trash can, just drunk as a skunk at the age of 16. When I would drink, it would bring out a different side of Kevin, right? There was no feelings, there was no fears, right? I was on top of the world. It was 9 times before I figured out this thing. My grandmother was dying in front of me, and I was having a hard time trying to understand that.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to How the F Is This a Podcast. I'm your host, Doc G.
And I'm Crystal Renee.
And today we have our special guest, Kevin Holland, who will be here. We'll interview him. Today's episode is called Straight, No Chaser. So we're going to dive into a little bit of substance use, recovery, lifelong journey, and really just get to know Kevin and where he's at now and a little bit about his journey. So Kevin, how you feeling today?
Man, I'm feeling great. Happy to be here. Thank y'all for the invite. I'm feeling all special today.
We're happy you're here. We're happy you're here. Yeah, I'm so happy that we have you to have this conversation around substance misuse because there's so many myths about it, misperceptions about it. And a lot of times we don't hear a lot about recovery. So having this opportunity to have this conversation feels very special to us, but also to the community because it's something that we need to talk more about.
Yeah.
So let's start it off.
Let's start up. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So where you from? What do you do now? Like, where you at today?
Yeah. So, a little bit something about me, when it comes to sobriety and recovery, by the grace of God, by July, I'll have 5 years of continuous sobriety, right? And clean time. And that is nothing to sneeze at in my case, right? A little something about me. I was born in Richmond, Virginia. I always like to start off by saying that I was a DC Alexandria transplant because I did live up there for about 13, 14 years.
Oh, okay.
And then I came back to Richmond. Crazy enough, when we talk about addiction and substance abuse, the height of my substance abuse started in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And Alexandria, Virginia. I grew up in Richmond. My mother was pretty much a single mom. She, however, was deaf. So I grew into adulthood a little bit early than most kids my age.
Yeah.
And so you could say maybe, possibly, or clinically, since we got the doctor here, that my substance use sort of came on at an early age because of the fact that I grew into adulthood, right? Learning to, not deal with things as a child. And so my grandmother stepped in and she raised me and, took me to Alexandria, sort of showed me a different light of what a kid is supposed to go through. And, as I grew through the teenage years, I sort of fell into that trap of substance use. And so, a little bit about where I'm at today, happy to be here. I work in economic development with Visit Richmond. I'm on the tourism side. I'm also, an active clinician. And so happy to be able to give back and nonetheless happy to be here to be able to share my story a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm curious, right? So you have mentioned that you were in Richmond, you moved to DC, Alexandria. What age was this?
So as a child, my grandmother sort of took me under her wing at around 13, 14, close into my teenager years.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was sort of becoming a rebel. And so my mom was like, can't handle it. But then I moved up to Northern Virginia to live with her. And then after high school and going to finding college is when I came back to Richmond because I attended Virginia State University. And that's where sort of the height of my drinking sort of
started in college.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your behaviors. Like, what was you displaying in the house when you was with your mom while you had to go with your grandmother?
Yeah. So I think my drinking really didn't take off until like my teenager years. I, for one, was struggling with sort of that identity focus, trying to figure out like where I fit into this place we call life or this area what we call life, right? My peers at the time had different lives than I did, right? I was being raised by my grandmother where my peers had the mom and dad. They were going to extracurricular activities and they had their parents there. Whereas my grandmother couldn't necessarily do all those different things. So I was sort of pretty much in an identity crisis. And I think that's where the drinking sort of came into play, right? It was me trying to sort of figure out who I was. And that was scary. And so I hid that with the drink.
So you had your first drink approximately around what age?
Let's say about like 15, 16 was around the age when I had my first drink. I, struggled in high school, right? And so here's a little bit about my truth. I struggled in high school a little bit and eventually figured out my own plan, right? My identity crisis was so hard that I decided to go to Job Corps, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time, if anybody knows anything about Job Corps, the Department of Labor, right, they had 18-year-olds with 21-year-olds. Mm. And so at that time, you could easily get alcohol from somebody that was in the dorms. Yeah, it was a little bit older. So at 16, I had my first alcohol beverage. I remember like it was yesterday. It was gin and juice. And it was amazing,
that
right?
That was my go-to.
Yeah, it was gin and juice. That just gives you a little bit about my age. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, so gin and juice. And I remember being in a trash can, just drunk as a skunk at the age of 16 in Charleston, West Virginia, enrolled as a student at Job Corps, right? But again, that was me trying to figure out my identity, right? I was struggling with high school. My grandmother was super strict at the time. And I was just trying to figure out an easier way to sort of do it on Kevin's way, and I thought Job Corps was the way to go. Yeah. So that was my really first introduction to alcohol.
Yeah. Can we stay right there for 1 second? Because I want you to educate us. Like both of you are now serving the community when it comes to substance use.
Yeah.
And so can you educate us, Dr. G?
What's up?
Because you had this experience. You had one experience where you're drunk and you had that time when you were a teenager. I had some drunk times too. Yeah. But I never became dependent on it. What happens for people when they become dependent on drinking?
Yeah, so the dependency is different for everybody, right? So like one thing that I would want to know is like, okay, do you have a family history of this? Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's important to know that, because a lot of people who parents may struggle with substance use, they're more prone to struggle with substance use too. Or someone, a close relative in their family. Want to know about the environment that they're in, the type of people that they're hanging out with. For Kevin's sake, he's saying that, he was struggling with identity of just life, period. Mm-hmm. So with that struggle, he was suppressing his feelings and emotions, it seems like, that he may have found safety within the alcoholism. Okay. Right? Yeah. So everything about life for individuals is about feeling safe, right? Mm-hmm. And when we don't feel safe, we do things to certainly be that, so that we can feel safe. Yeah. That makes sense. So some of the things we may do may be harmful to us, but it may be a safety.
In that moment, it feels safe. Yeah. And do you feel like in those moments when you had started, it was some safety that you found?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I think, again, it was the identity crisis that I was going through. And so when I would drink, it would bring out a different side of Kevin, right? Mm. There was no feelings, there was no fears, right? I was on top of the world, right? But it was completely a mess, right? It was not the true Kevin. Yeah. And so going back to what was comfortable, the stove is hot. I don't want to burn myself. Let me go back to somewhere else, right? And so the alcohol was that comfortable spot for me. Yeah. Yeah.
So what was your support like during this time? So you're not at home with grandma, you're not with your mother. Yeah. You're the only child?
Yes, on my mom's side, yeah.
Okay, so only child on your mom's side. What was your support with like your family on either side of it? Yeah. So mom or dad?
Well, really, my grandmother was amazing, right? I love my grandmother to death. She is one that just took me under her wing and really made me into the man that I am today. She's the one that first noticed it becoming an issue. So let me just rewind back a little bit. After Job Corps, I got a 2-year scholarship at West Virginia State University. Totally drunked out of that and failed that scholarship. And then I came home and my grandmother was like, okay, you need to figure out what you're going to do, right? The scholarship, you totally drunked out of that. And so we said, all right, let's go to Virginia State University. Went to Virginia State. And pretty much just, it was the same thing. It was just a drunk Kevin enrolled in a university where I just like pretty much, was partying and drinking all the time. And so, when it comes to support, my grandmother realized that when I left Virginia State or I decided to, drop out, she was like, okay, I think that the alcohol is where you're struggling with, because you're at that point, and what we sort of define when it becomes an issue is when your life has become unmanageable, right? At that point, I wasn't, meeting my goals of finishing my degree.
Yeah.
I dropped out of West Virginia State. I dropped out of Virginia State. And so it was like, okay, what's really going on here?
Right.
Like it's something else is bigger going on than besides me. So yeah.
Despite rising societal stressors, it's possible to take care of your well-being. Levels Mental Health provides compassionate care for those experiencing mental health challenges. Our holistic approach addresses anxiety, depression, behavior issues, and trauma, ensuring individuals feel understood. It's time for accessible mental health services for all. Visit levelsmentalhealth.com to learn more, schedule a consultation, or donate to expand outreach and support our community.
Were there little things that, I know you talked about those bigger moments when your life became unmanageable.
Yeah.
But for those people that are listening that may be curious, like, is this starting to become a thing?
Yeah.
Were there like little things that were happening when you look back, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah, I was doing too much.
Yeah.
It was just, was there things like that?
Oh, absolutely. Looking back at it, man, and if anybody is listening, I think the number one question you have to ask yourself is, has your life become unmanageable, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it definitely did, right? In a social setting, right? At one point, when everybody was done drinking and it was time to clearly go home, I was still out there trying to find the next drink and continue the party, right?
Yeah.
I think, we talk about responsibilities, right? Getting up to go to work every single day. And if someone's listening or watching this podcast, a lot of you guys know that was with me in my career in Washington, D.C. I couldn't make it to work on Mondays. That was a thing for me. Like, I had a hard time getting up to go to work on Mondays. And so we talk about, job loss. We talk about failing to just meet basic responsibilities of like, budgeting and financing. And it was like, and for some people say, well, everybody does that. Everybody drinks and parties and have a good time. Well, yeah, but not everybody just decides they don't want to go to work on Monday.
Yeah. I don't never want to go to work. I get what you're saying. And thank you also, too, for sharing that, because sometimes I feel like when people are, like, when they're living their life, they may not really understand that this is leading towards
an issue.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go back to your story real quick.
Yeah.
So now you at Virginia State, grandma says, hey, alcohol is your issue.
Yeah.
What's the next step y'all take? One, do you claim that it's your issue?
Not at first. I think at the time I was 21, and at any good 21-year-old, they would be like, I don't have a drinking issue. What are you talking about? And so super in denial. And it talks about that from a clinical standpoint, like, people go through this denial stage of saying, like, I don't have an issue. I don't have a problem. And so that was clearly me. And I tell my clients this all the time, right? I'm like, not once, not twice, not three, not four, not 5, 6, 7. It was 9 times before I figured out this thing and said, okay, I have an issue. Okay, let me figure out how to deal with it. Maybe these people are right. Maybe the social workers are right. Maybe my therapists are right,
Yeah.
So at that time, she sent me to treatment, some fancy treatment center in Florida in Boca Raton. And It was nice. But I came home, it was like 30 days done. And I went back out and still had a good time, right? I didn't take those lessons seriously at 21. I wish I did, because I'd be a little bit more accomplished in life than I am now, right? But yeah, it was around the age of 21.
So how many treatment centers did you go to?
I went to 9, man. I went to I know that number on the back of my hand. 9 treatment centers, and it started at 21, and I'm 36 now. And so again, by the grace of God, by July I'll have 5 years of continuous sobriety and clean time. But yeah, I went to 9 treatment centers. Majority of all were in Florida. Florida's like the state capital of all recovery. And then one in Arizona, right? And for me, it was like, I got drunk, time to go to another treatment center. It was like I eloped through all these different treatment centers. I was just hopping and just, let me go get another 30 days, get some dry time, and then come home. But I think the turning point for me was when my grandmother died. right? And so she
When
passed.
was that?
My grandmother passed away in October of 2016, and I think that was the turning point for me, right? I think realizing for so long and so many years that she was my clutch, and that I could just always fall back on grandmother and be like, Grandma, I'm back from treatment, but I'm not gonna listen to you. I'm gonna still drink. And so, but in 2016 when she passed away, I remember this day like it was yesterday. She was on her deathbed at the hospital, and talk about hitting rock bottom and feeling at your lowest. Honestly did not know how to regulate my emotions at that time, right? My grandmother was dying in front of me, and I was having a hard time trying to understand that. I was a scared little boy, right? They say when we start using at such a young age that the developmental process of our brains, sort of stop, right?
Yeah.
And so I became that 18, 16-year-old kid again, right? And did not know what to do. And was fearful. And I think that's when I realized that, okay, I got to do something because I don't have my grandmother anymore. It's time for me to put my big boy pants on.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That for the first time, like as you're speaking, and maybe because I'm intentionally listening, like in my spirit, I feel so proud of you.
Thank you.
Because I think before now, when I hear people share about their recovery journey, and actually I think this is my first time having a conversation with someone's like, I've been 9 times, right?
Yeah.
And what I felt in my spirit was, and you kept going back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like sometimes people get a hard rap for the fact that they had to go back instead of thinking you got to go back.
Yeah.
You had the money was available for that to happen. The resource was available for that to happen, all for you to get right here. And I am so proud of you for just not giving up in that, and I am sure that your grandmother is also very proud of you. Oh man.
I know she is. I mean, it's to this day, sometimes it's really hard to look at the mirror like, damn, who is this guy? He's doing some things now. You know what I mean? It's hard, to be, it's hard to sometimes be like, wow, I really have come a long way. But, I'm truly grateful for my grandmother, man. Like, if it had not been for her to really push that, down my ear and be like, look, you need to resolve this. This is something that you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I just kept listening to her. And while I didn't take it seriously at first, when she passed away, I knew instantly that was the first thing I had to deal with. And that was my alcoholism.
Mm-hmm. Out of all 9 of the programs that you've been to, was there anybody or a significant moment that just stands out to you that you remember and that is a staple for you to continue onto your recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. Shout outs to Banyan Treatment Centers. They're watching. Banyan Treatment Centers comes through. I mean, really an amazing treatment center here. But I remember sitting in the social worker's office or my therapist's office, and she was like, okay, what are we going to do next? Because we don't want you to go to another treatment center. And she was like, is there any other family member that you can sort of fall back on or trust to sort of help out since grandmother's not here? And I remember that I had an aunt that lived in Richmond, and I was like, yeah, my aunt's in recovery. And she was like, really? Well, do you have that aunt's number? And I was like, yeah, let's give her a call. And at this time, my aunt that I'm referring to is on my dad's side of the family.
Okay.
And I was somewhat really close to my dad's side of the family, but I hadn't been that close up until that point. And so I called my aunt, who I knew that had some clean time. She was in recovery. She's a big advocate for the recovery community in Richmond. And I called her from treatment, and she was like, where are you at? I said, I'm in a rehab, auntie. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe your life has become so unmanageable. You know what I mean? And so she was just like, really it was like the coming to the altar moment with my aunt. And she was just like, I'm here to help you whatever you need help with. Wow. And man, ever since that day, I have been glued to my aunt, and I know she'll be watching this. And auntie, I love you so much. She's been my rock since in so many ways. My dad and my mom have always said that I'm close to my aunt because of what she's giving me as far as my foundation, right?
Yeah.
I tell my clients all the time, find someone that believes in you, that wants to support you in your recovery, and give you that foundation, right? Because you don't need any cracks in your foundation, right? It's important to have a strong foundation as you walk this next step of life.
I'm trying not to get emotional and cry.
Yeah.
I'll be super with you.
It's all good.
Sorry.
You know?
So now, I know you just finished school recently, and you're currently in grad school.
Yes, yes.
Working towards your LCSW.
Absolutely.
And you just recently started working with those that are trying to be in recovery or that aren't in recovery, right?
Yeah.
So how has that experience been for you to be on the other side?
Oh, it's been amazing, man. You know, some days, I'm not gonna lie, some days I'm like, I be tired. I'm like, I just don't want to do this anymore, you know, but I understand it. Clients are going through the struggle, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes my clients, I understand what they're going through, right? I had to look at myself and play that take back. Like, I went to treatment 9 times too.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't get it on the first go around. And so I have to give my clients a little bit of grace, right? I have to sort of meet them where they're at and sort of understand that, like, this thing is not an overnight thing, right? And so as frustrated as sometimes I can get with clients' progress, I understand that I have to meet them where they're at, right?
Yeah.
And try to support them as best as I can. But it's been amazing, man. You know, I'm a jack of all trades. You know, like I said, I work for Visit Richmond. Shout outs to Richmond, Virginia, and the Richmond region. But I also am, you know, an advocate and a clinician in the community trying to help folks deal with substance use. And so super proud of the agencies that I work for, Levels and River City Comprehensive Counseling Services. You know, these agencies have given me an opportunity to sort of give back in a way to help individuals that are struggling.
Yeah. We appreciate you too. Yeah. Kevin is a really good CSAC instructor. So
Tell people what that is. Some people may not know what that is.
Oh, so CSAC is a certified substance abuse counselor. He's in his, what you would call his residency. So he's getting his hours and he takes the state board exam to have his, you know, CSAC and not be a resident in New York.
Yeah.
So pretty much he does support groups on Thursday nights for me. And he does support groups other places. But I know that you also attend like, what, AA groups sometimes?
I do. I attend, so I attend AA and I also attend, you know, Narcotics Anonymous groups as well. You know, both support groups are amazing. They're 12-step programs for those that don't know what those programs are, but amazing groups to sort of get involved in. The fellowship is amazing. So if anybody is watching and is looking to try to really figure out how they want to conquer their recovery, you know, I strongly support a 12-step program. But yeah, being active, being involved in those, you know, getting on board positions in those support groups is huge. There's conferences, conventions. There's actually a convention happening in Ocean City this weekend. You know, so yeah, I'm pretty involved in those support groups as well.
Yeah. So we talked about your story, and again, thank you for sharing it. And I want us to transition now to how other people can identify signs and also some of those myths that come along with substance use that keep people hiding from speaking their truth, right? So starting off with that, what do you feel like what is a myth that you've heard or that you felt yourself when it comes to substance misuse?
Yeah. You know, I think a huge myth, well, when to substance use, you know, I get a lot of friends. I get a lot of friends and colleagues that say, oh, you know, I feel like I drink a lot. And, you know, I feel like I drink a glass of wine every single day. Like, is that bad? Like, do I have an issue? And I'm like, you know, again, you have to ask yourself, when your life has become unmanageable and you can't meet the necessary responsibilities of your daily living, then I think that's when we have to have a question, right? As far as a myth in recovery, you know, I always like to say, you know, I tell a lot of the new guys and new girls that are coming into the program or trying to find recovery, you know, recovery isn't like this huge death sentence to a social life, right? Like, now granted, I didn't do this in my first year of recovery, right? But I go everywhere, right? And I tell clients, it's like, you are designed to be a productive member of society. You're designed to do anything that anybody else can do. You just can't drink or drug.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You can go to bars, you can go to movies, you can go to restaurants, right? Now, am I sitting at a bar every single day, or am I going to sit in the dining room, right?
Yeah.
Probably going to sit in the dining room.
Yeah.
But if there is no seats in the dining room, and I really like the restaurant, I might sit at the bar, right?
Yeah.
But it took me a while to get there,
Yeah.
right? It's not like an overnight thing where I was like, all right, let me just go sit at the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my point is like, I want folks to know that recovery isn't this like horrible thing that you may think or have heard. Like all these people do is go to meetings and support groups all day. Then they go home, go to sleep, and go to work and go to support groups. No, that's not how life is, right? Look at me, I'm living my best life, right?
Yeah,
About to go to DR in July.
Yeah,
Right?
that's good.
Yeah, like you gotta like live your life.
Mhm.
And so, and the great thing about it is that recovery helps you find that.
Yeah.
Right? It helps you find like what type of life you are, right? Because you've been hiding everything and suppressing everything with substance use that now that you found recovery, you get a chance to see like what you really like, what you like to do.
Because people forget, like, as we grow up in our teenage years, most of us are not drinking and smoking and, engaging in all these drugs, and we still have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We find things to do to have fun. And I think that we lose that as we grow, in age.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like we just need to get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Of what fun is.
Yeah.
Like fun isn't always having to go to the bar, we ordering hookah and getting a whole bunch of shots and drinking. Like you go to the amusement park, you could go to the museum, like you go have a picnic.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a water gunfight.
Yeah, you can.
You can do so many things. We going to the pool today. We're gonna cook out.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of things that we could do. I think that people struggle with conversation. And when they engage in substances, most people, when you hear them speak, they say that they feel more free. They're more social. They can communicate with people better. They like to be in certain environments. Take all of that away from them, they don't have none of those skills.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now they got anxiety. Now they seeing things. Now they're depressed.
Yeah.
But truly, you still are all those things under the influence of those substances. It's just that you're now suppressing it, and you're showing your real self, but not being able to see it in that sense because of the imbalance.
Yeah,
that you're
that makes
experiencing.
sense. That makes sense. I think as someone who grew up, if you watched our podcast, Kevin, you would know that I'm adopted. But majority of my family have been addicted to something.
Okay.
Right? Almost all of them has something. And so I sometimes, I won't drink at home by myself.
Mm.
Because I'm scared that I will start drinking on a regular basis. So what are some warning signs that people can notice if they are, before it becomes unmanageable, but when you're just all right, let's say, if I'm just throwing this out, I haven't even really thought it through. I do that sometimes. So let's say there's 3 steps.
Yeah.
To top 3 is level 3.
Yeah.
So level 1 is something's happening. Level 2 is and level 3 is it's unmanageable.
Yeah.
How can somebody notice if level 1 they're starting to drink more? Does that make sense?
I would say the first thing is increase in tolerance.
All right.
So if you say you're used to drinking 1 or 2 drinks when you go out, and then you increase to 3 to 4, and then you increase to 5 drinks, and you're taking 7 shots. Now you taking 9 shots out. It's an increase every week that you're going out, or monthly.
Okay.
That's step 1. That something's going on.
Okay.
You're trying to suppress something.
Mm-hmm.
You're not speaking about something. You should really kind of evaluate yourself or seek some type of consultation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think 2 would be social withdrawal. Any social withdrawal. So most people who are struggling with some type of addiction, I mean, they may be social with the people that also engage.
Yeah.
But to somebody that doesn't live that life and is living either a sober life or just moderately celebratory, engaging in something, they'll try to hide that from them.
Okay.
Right. So when you find yourself trying to hide or feeling embarrassed about what you're doing, it's an issue.
Okay.
And I would think that the third one, I would say, if you got into any legal issues related to it, if you see any impairments as far as cognitive impairments, or as well as changes within your work environment or changes on how you interact with your family and engage, that's when your life is becoming a little bit unmanageable off that substance, and you should definitely seek treatment and consultation.
Yeah. So increase, withdrawal, and then impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you
Absolutely
have
agree.
anything to add on to that?
No, I think you hit the spots on, Doc. I think, social withdrawal was huge, right? Because I think at one point, I knew I couldn't drink in public the way I wanted to drink. And so I would want to drink before I either got to the function or couldn't wait to try to be normal in front of the people and then get back home and started drinking again. You know what I mean?
Okay. So when you say that, you mean like you're about to go hang out with a certain type of people or any people?
It would be any people, right?
You got to a place that's like, I don't want... Is it because they brought to your attention you're drinking?
Correct, right. Or they would say things like, wow, you really drinking them down, aren't you? Like certain comments.
So now
and I would
feel like you got to hide.
Right, and I would feel like I would have to hide that drinking part. Yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
All right. So like, one of the questions that I always like to ask is how can community... I'll say it this way. If you start seeing these signs in your person or a friend or family, how can we address or bring it up in a way that's gentle?
Yeah.
For somebody.
For me, really it's about having that conversation, right? If you have the relationship with that person and you know that person, and there's a trust that's been built between you and that individual, I think having a conversation is huge. It's like, setting them aside and say, hey, how's life been these days?
Yeah.
Tell me about what's going on with the bottle, what's going on with the drink, you know what I mean? And so hinting at that, and obviously, again, this is all based on you having a relationship with that person.
Course.
Yeah, definitely. Because with that person, they need to feel safe.
Yeah.
Too. So that safety and trust is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And having this conversation when they're sober.
Yeah.
So not when they're
absolutely. Yeah.
I think y'all would know that, but just in case y'all don't know that, you're welcome.
Yeah. I think that was important too for me. Like, and I had multiple people that came up to me that would be like, what's going on with your drinking, right? And I'd be like, bro, I don't even know you. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
but you'll see that, you'll see that resistance, you'll see that anger, irritability pop up.
Yeah.
Right. But if it was but I had somebody that I hadn't seen in a while that knew my family, and they approached me too. And I instantly started bawling, right?
Yeah.
So there's a different effect, right? Somebody that I just know from just hanging out and you approaching me about my drinking, I'm going to get real defensive. But if it's somebody that I knew, that knew my family, that approached me about the drinking, I instantly, felt guilt and shame, right?
Yeah. May I ask you a personal question? You can make tasks if you want. I know. But I want to hear this. Let's hear. Be quiet. Be quiet. Okay.
Yeah.
My question is, what do you feel like you missed out on?
Yeah.
In your challenges with drinking?
Absolutely. Off the bat, my education, for one. I am always, telling folks that, like, yes, I'm in grad school for my master's, and yes, I finished my bachelor's in human services, but I feel like I am, like, really 2 steps behind, right? And I feel like I should be a little bit more accomplished than most folks that are my age, that are in my cohort, right? So I feel like I'm a little behind on that, but, things happen for a reason, right? God put me here to show me and to help other individuals, right? It's not too late, right? But I would say that some of the things that, maybe I wish I would have went back on was maybe taking the suggestions what my grandmother told me the first or second go around, right? It took me 9 treatment centers later, right? Had I listened to her the second time and finished out the treatment center the second time, I probably would have been done with my master's by now, right? And possibly owning a mental health company. But, there's things that happen, right? I think also my drinking also, again, our development sort of stops when we engage in substance use at such a young age because our brains are still developing. And so I feel like when I got sober, I instantly went back to being that 16-year-old kid again. And so a lot of things that I were doing were sort of in a 16, 18-year-old mentality and I guess you could say 25 to 30-year-old body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
Do you feel
again,
like you're still developing? Do you feel like you're still catching up?
absolutely. I think so. I think every day I learn something new, right? I'd be like, luckily, the great thing about recovery is that they say the great thing about recovery is you get your feelings back. The bad thing about recovery is you get your feelings back. You know what I mean? And so you got to understand like what you're feeling every single day, right? The great thing also is that you get a chance to see like what you really like and what you don't like, right? Because substance use sort of masks all that, and you can't really tell what you like or what you do like,
You have been in your recovery for 5 years, but if you could, would you be able to identify what was the heaviest feeling that you felt when you started? Because you said you get your feelings back, and then that's a good thing, and a bad thing is you get your feelings back. Is there one that was just like, ooh, I wasn't ready for this, like grief or anger?
I think grief, right? I think once my grandmother died in 2016 and her being my clutch and realizing that I needed to be out on my own and navigate getting my own apartment and getting my car and, really understanding like, this is it. Like, there is no more fuck ups. Like, you need to do what you got to do and deal with life. That hurt.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to deal with that. And at the time I was living in Alexandria by myself.
Yeah.
My aunt and my dad's side of the family was in Richmond. And I just felt so alone. And nobody else really knew what I was going through up in Northern Virginia and in DC. They didn't know what I was going through. And so at that time, which I don't recommend to anybody, I feel like I needed the support. I needed a support system to really, sort of gravitate towards me and let me know like, hey, everything's going to be okay. Because I didn't know what to do, right? And throughout that time, I did struggle with trying to maintain abstinence of alcohol, right? There were times where I pick it back up and then I get 30 days clean, and then I'd do like, fuck it, I'm gonna relapse again, and then I get 60 days clean. And so that part was a struggle, right? Trying to figure out what to do with my emotions, right? And that grief is hard,
Yeah.
Well, we definitely talked about a lot today. We did. And I wish we could sit here and talk some more, but we do have to wrap it up for today. But I do want to leave off with one saying thank you, for being a part of our podcast and just, sharing your story. Like Kristen said earlier, we hope that your story does impact someone else and somebody can learn about the warning signs or learn how to support another individual who may be struggling with alcoholism or any type of substance use. I know Kevin personally, and we've been able to, gain a friendship within the last year.
Absolutely.
So I've known a little bit about your story, but it was good to, find out a little bit more.
Definitely.
And, open that brotherhood up some more. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like I said, Kevin is a great CSAC worker. He calls me too many times and complain. I'll be constantly coming out. I'm like, Kevin, stop calling me.
No, seriously, yeah. No.
We have good conversations though. We have good conversations.
Indeed. Thank you, sir.
Kristen, what you got to say? What you got to end off with? What you want to say to the people?
Yeah. So first I want to say to you, Kevin, that as he says, thank you so much for sharing your story. We know that it's going to help one person. And a reminder, not to diminish what you share, but you are exactly where you need to be.
Thank you.
You are right on time. And I know sometimes when we are looking around and seeing other things and then also have these challenges that we experience, we feel like we are behind.
Yeah.
But you're right on time. You're exactly where you need to be. And so for people that are listening, our hope is that you can hear this. And if it's you, right? If you are a person that's experiencing challenges with any substance, that you feel courageous and safe enough to say something and start a conversation with someone so that they can connect you to care. And if you are someone doing life with someone, that you do not give up hope, that you try to find more resources so you can remain in that connection. Because even though I know that many people do this out of necessity, I don't want to turn into a community where we are constantly leaving people behind because they are going through hard times.
Yeah.
So do what we can to really support the people we need. We are so incredibly grateful for you.
Thank you so
And that's
much.
all I do.
Yeah. And
You
I
should.
want to ask something else.
Yeah.
Wait. Just make sure to, like, when you are trying to help, you know, maybe that loved one or friend that may be struggling with substances, that you're not forcing things on someone,
Yeah.
right? Like, try to understand where
Like
they're coming
punitive
from.
actions.
Yeah.
All that's, yeah.
Try to understand where they're coming from. Try to understand their emotions and
Yeah.
feelings that they're
Yeah, I
experiencing.
like that.
You know, because everybody is not going to be ready for treatment.
Right.
You
No,
know?
definitely not.
Especially, it may
Yeah.
take them some time, and it
Yeah.
could be years. It could be months. Maybe it could be days. Everybody is different, you know. But
Right.
if you sign up to be that support for that person, don't take it personal, because this is their struggles that they're going through,
Yeah.
you know. And just be there as support.
Yeah.
Just understand. Just listen. And, you know, advocate, provide them the resources. But when they're ready, they'll let you know when they're ready.
Yeah.
But you just be as consistent as you can be.
Yeah.
With
And be gentle, please, y'all. Please be gentle with folks. Because sometimes we are very aggressive with our approach. And sometimes some people just need some love. So, anyway, that's it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for joining,
y'all. See y'all next time.